Mystical greetings, witches and warlocks, and welcome to another episode of Crystals, Cauldrons, and Conversations, the podcast where we talk about all things witchy, mystical, and magical, while also tying in healing, wellness, and some personal growth. I am your magical host, Kaylee, and today's episode, we're talking about shadow work. Not the trending version, not the dramatic version, the mental health version. The kind that changes patterns, the kind that asks you to take a look at the parts of yourself that you normally rush past. So let's get into it. As always, we will start with our moon muse. The moon is currently in the sign of Libra. Libra radiates a kind of patience that allows us to act optimally when facing different difficulties. It does not allow the person to panic or get nervous. Those born under the lunar influence of Libra are especially good at times when sanity and a clear mind are required. The moon is currently in the waning moon phase. So, as we enter the waning moon phase, the energy of the moon is decreasing. Our emotions are focusing and returning to normal. Our moods may drop. We may find everything boring or annoying, and we may want to be alone during this time. As the moon's energy decreases, so does ours. Our organism then takes advantage of it to get rid of what it does not need. So, that is a great time for ridding of toxins or losing weight. So if you plan to start a diet or doing a cleanse to rid of toxins, please do so safely. This is a good time to do it. It is also a good time to start the journey of ridding any addiction that is considered harmful to us, and that could be anything right down to the smallest thing, like if you have a bad habit of biting your nails. So it's a good time for that as well. However, it is not the time to start any other important things. It is a time to rest. As the cycle closes, it is preparing to start again with another set of experiences and opportunities. So that is our moon muse. And now we're moving on to our daily enchantment. Today's daily enchantment is just a basic protection spell. This is a great spell for beginners, but can also be used if you're a more experienced practitioner. So this spell is designed to, like I said, great for beginners, but for those who seek to create a protective barrier around themselves using simple and easy to find elements. So some of the supplies that are suggested would be a clear quartz crystal, a white candle, a sandalwood incense, a small bowl of water, and sea salt. To prepare for this, you want to make sure you're in a quiet place where you won't be interrupted and you can focus without distractions. And place all your supplies on a flat surface. If you use an altar, then definitely use that. So the first step is to start by lighting the white candle and the sandalwood incense. Then you want to hold the quartz crystal in your hands and close your eyes. Focus on the positive energy you wish to attract. Place the crystal in the center of the surface and draw a circle of sea salt around it. Sprinkle some salty water over the crystal while visualizing the white light wrapping around you, and recite aloud, "Protection surrounds me, my energy flourishes, nothing negative touches me, nothing bad reaches me, so mote it be." And then you want to let the candle burn completely. Once it does, you want to collect what's left of the salt and also collect the crystal. And you want to thank the protective forces, and you can store your crystal in a safe place. And then for getting rid of the salt or disposing of the salt, it's usually recommended that you dispose of it outside in the earth. So that is our daily enchantment. Give that one a try. I know I definitely will. All right, so let's get into shadow work. So shadow work traces back to a Swiss psychiatrist named Carl Jung, who described the shadow as the unconscious parts of ourselves that we suppress, deny, or reject. And the most important truth about this is that the shadow is not an evil part of ourselves. It's just an unacknowledged part of ourselves. So what creates a shadow? So our shadow selves, the shadow of us, it forms early. Um, for example, if a child expresses anger and hears something from the parent, like "stop being so dramatic," or a child cries and the parent says "you're too sensitive," a child speaks up but they get ignored, The nervous system starts to adapt to that. That's why they tell you that the first 5 years of a child's life are so extremely important and really does form a lot of who they become later in life. But that basically tells our nervous system that anger is unsafe and sensitivity is embarrassing and our needs are just inconvenient. So those traits kind of just get pushed into the back and ignored. But just because those traits get buried doesn't mean that they're gone. So they can resurface later in life as overreacting emotionally, being a people pleaser, being a perfectionist, being someone who's easily envious of others and jealous, being somebody who's just emotionally unavailable or emotionally shut down, being somebody who has explosive anger issues, and also having a pretty intense fear of abandonment. So, shadow work is basically meeting those parts instead of shaming them. So, I just want to talk a little bit about shadow work versus inner child work. Many people use these terms interchangeably, but they are not the same. And before I go too far into this, I just want to mention that I am not a medical doctor or a mental health professional. All this information is based on my own research and my own experiences in life. And some of this information may be sensitive to listen to, so just please make sure you are in the right headspace before you continue to listen. So, shadow work versus inner child work. Like I said, many people use these terms interchangeably. They are not the same. Shadow work is basically the entire forest, while inner child work is just like a specific piece of that forest. So, shadow work explores all disowned parts of us, basically, like our anger, our ego, shame, control, and even confidence that we have hidden away. While inner child work focuses specifically on your childhood wounds and your unmet needs. So, for example, shadow work would ask, why am I triggered right now? But inner child work would ask, when did I first start feeling this way? Where does that come from, deeper and farther back into childhood? Shadow work integrates the full personality, while inner child work nurtures the origin of the wound. I will do probably another episode that's fully on inner child work as well. So they do overlap and they like support each other, but they are their own separate things. They are not the same thing. So, how to do shadow work? So, let's move from concept to practice because shadow work is not just thinking about your trauma at 11 o'clock at night. It's an intentional thing, it's structured and it's paced. And that's important. That's important for people to be aware of. So, one way you can go about doing shadow work is through therapy. This is typically the safest way for doing deep work, especially if there is trauma involved, because it can be difficult to resurface those things and to come to terms with them. So, some therapies that will kind of naturally include shadow work would be what's called psychodynamic therapy, internal family systems therapy, EMDR, which involves eye movement, trauma informed therapy, and somatic therapy. So, in internal family systems, which is developed by Richard C. Schwartz, the shadow often shows up as these exiled parts and these protective parts. So, instead of asking yourself something like, why am I like this? You would want to ask yourself, what part of me is currently protecting me? And that kind of shifts your perspective and removes the shame from it. So, with going to therapy, it allows a place that's safe for exploring your triggers, and also a place for processing childhood memories, rewriting harmful beliefs, and learning some emotional regulation. If you have PTSD, dissociation, severe anxiety, or depression, doing deep shadow work alone can feel destabilizing. So, having support really does matter. You can also do shadow work by journaling. So, this is probably one of the most accessible ways of doing it. Shadow journaling goes very deep than it's not just surface reflection. So, it asks things like, what trait in others irritate me the most? What emotion feels shameful for me to admit? When I feel rejected, what story do I tell myself? What role did I play in my family? What would happen if I stopped playing that role? So after writing, answers to questions like that, you would want to pause and then ask yourself, where did I learn this belief? Is it still protecting me? Is it still true? And that pause is kind of where the integration begins. There are actual shadow work journals that you can get. I have one of them. I have what's called the Shadow Work Journal. I got mine on Amazon. There's also one called Shadow Work Journal and Workbook. There's the Complete Shadow Work Workbook and Journal. And then there's Embrace Your Shadow to Find Your Light. Those are just to name a few of the more popular shadow work journals. Like I said, I got mine on Amazon. It has all kinds of information in it about what shadow work is, and it has exercises to actually do the shadow work. They provide prompts and exercises, like I said, but just remember, a journal guides you. It does not replace therapy and it does not replace accountability. So, and it's also important to take it slow when working on this. Another important piece of this is tracking your triggers. It's simple but powerful. So, every time you feel a strong emotional reaction, write it down. So, I'm talking, a very strong emotional reaction to something. So, write down what happened, how did you feel, what did you assume, and what did your body do? For example, if anything can really be a trigger. So, but for example, if you hear a song for some reason that song is triggering to you, you would want to write down what happened. Well, I heard this song. What did I feel? It made me extremely sad. What did I assume? That a lot of the times the reason why you're triggered is it's your nervous system basically sending a message saying that you're unsafe or something is wrong, even if it's not. So that's why it's really important to learn our triggers, because then we can address the pattern of that and change it so it's not as triggering. Because shadow work lives in patterns. So if you repeatedly feel abandoned when someone takes space that is not about today, it's about the first time space felt like lost to you. And then integrating the inner child work. So if shadow work reveals a younger wound, that's where the inner child work would come in. So at that point, you could, close your eyes, picture yourself at that age when the wound was actually formed, and ask yourself, what did you need at that time? Did you need protection? Did you need validation? Did you need comfort? And then you want to imagine that you're offering it to yourself right now. So you're basically inner child work is basically the reparenting of yourself. You basically become your own parent, and reparenting is very powerful. It basically tells your nervous system and teaches your nervous system that you're not alone anymore. And those things that were once unmet, you can now meet for yourself. And they don't have to continue to be unmet. So then there's somatic shadow work. So trauma and suppressed emotion are stored in the body. Research from psychiatrist, I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize. It's Bessel van der Kolk, highlights how unprocessed experiences live in the nervous system. So when triggered, you would ask, where do I feel this? In my chest, in my stomach, in my jaw? Maybe you're somebody who um, clenches up your shoulders. I'm that type of person. Like I carry a lot of tension in my shoulders. Jaw clenching, I do that as well. Um, when I'm triggered, I feel a lot in my stomach, definitely. So instead of analyzing these things immediately, you want to just take it slow, stay present, breathe into it, let the body complete what it never got to complete. Sometimes shadow work is less about thinking and more about just allowing. It's basically allowing all of those suppressed emotions to be present and to show up. And then you can also do spiritual integration if that's something that you want to do. So if you resonate with it with different rituals, there's considering our theme of our podcast, there's the new moon reflection, there's dark moon journaling, grounding stones like obsidian is known for grounding, and then there's also candle meditation. But just as a reminder, crystals support awareness, they do not replace responsibility. Rituals do support healing, but it does not bypass it. And the true magic is integration and including doing the work and integrating the shadow work and therapy if you choose to, the inner child work if you feel that you need to because you've discovered some childhood wounds. Now, going too fast with shadow work, with any kind of healing, it is a very, very slow process, and it's a slow process for a reason because there are risks to taking it too fast. So, shadow work can stir up things like grief, rage, definitely shame, panic, and even dissociation. So, you want to go slowly because you don't want to just dismantle your entire personality in one weekend. It's like it's really a lifelong work. It's just something that you can always continue to work on. So, if you're doing shadow work and you feel overwhelmed, take a break from it. Just pause, take a break. You can always come back to it. Do your grounding techniques, make sure you're grounded, reach out to somebody if you need to, do therapy if that's something you choose to do, and things like that. It's a slow process. It needs to be a slow process because otherwise you could just completely overwhelm your nervous system and almost re-traumatize yourself in a way. So, let's talk about why shadow work matters. I feel like shadow work is something that's not talked about enough. I had never heard of it until I came across a random, I think, video or an ad for the shadow work journal that I actually have. And I was like, what is the shadow work journal? So then I started looking into what the shadow work journal was and what shadow work was. And I realized that it could be extremely beneficial to me based on, the things that I've been through. And I just feel like it's just not talked about enough. So the reason it matters is because unexamined wounds or unhealed wounds become patterns in your life, and you start repeating these patterns and doing all these things, and it's stemming from somewhere. It's not just because you're a bad person or a mean person or a cold-hearted person. They're coming from somewhere. Unexamined pain becomes projection. So if you have pain that hasn't been faced and you haven't dealt with it, you will unintentionally project it onto others, and that's very common. Just like unexamined fear becomes control. When our nervous system is fearful, our instincts are to control the situation, and you try to control tons of situations that you don't need to be in control of for the sake of taming that fear. So, shadow work basically turns your reaction into response. It builds an emotional intelligence. It reduces your pattern of self sabotaging. It'll increase your ability to trust yourself, and it'll allow you to say, I have anger, I have fear, I have insecurity, but I am still worthy, instead of shaming yourself through these emotions, which is often what happens. A lot of the times, it does happen in early childhood. So, a lot of the times, those messages are given to us very young. And we're now basically undoing the negative message and teaching ourselves that we don't have to be ashamed about having these emotions and feeling these things, and that we're still worthy of love from others and from ourselves, especially from ourselves. So your shadow is not your darkness. It's it's like an archive of every moment where you ever felt unsafe to just fully be yourself. So shadow work is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. So light the candle not to banish the dark, but to sit beside it and to listen until the parts of you that were once silenced no longer have to shout to be heard. So that is shadow work, a little bit about it. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave your feedback in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experiences or answer any questions, so feel free to share those as well. Check out the show notes for a 7-day shadow work challenge. And come sit around the cauldron with me next week when we talk all about paganism, its history, and its pathways. I'll be waiting to welcome you to the coven, and as always, stay magical.